Let's talk about one of the many things you saw during COVID. And you were the first nurse that I ever heard mention this. And this is mind-boggling. So, as everybody knows, when you go to the hospital, there's a ton of paperwork and somebody's sitting there typing all this information in. You discovered something really bizarre during COVID on the computer intake process. What did you discover?
Yeah, so it's interesting how it all came about because I was part of a group of practitioners in Sonoma County who had kind of banded together because we all were watching what was happening and we were very disturbed and concerned about it. And we were all feeling very attacked and constantly being gaslit. And we kind of came together in this group more to support each other
Mhm.
and help make sense of what we were seeing happen in the hospitals. And one of the nurses who worked for Sutter Health, I believe, brought it up to me. She said, "Hey, have you noticed that our charting systems aren't allowing us to document that COVID patients who are being admitted to the hospitals are unvaccinated, or sorry, are fully vaccinated?"
Hmm.
And so, and then there were a couple of other nurses present who concurred that in their respective hospitals across the county, this was the case for all of us. So at Kaiser, my chart, so we all were using the Epic charting systems. My chart would populate as soon as the patient was diagnosed with COVID. My chart would populate with a red banner across the top saying that the patient was unvaccinated.
And
And
that was automatic for every patient. It just popped up, and you didn't have any way to address that.
that is correct. So we were not trained in how to relabel the patient as being vaccinated. Uh, and so, and, and none of the staff members, so I ended up talking to all of my colleagues to find out, well, what are you doing about this?
Mhm.
None of them, it was a very complicated process to change that bar across the top of the chart,
Mhm.
and none
Mhm.
of them really knew how. I think one or two of them might have eventually figured out how to do it after asking for help from administrators.
Mm.
Uh, but I'll tell you, the fact is that all of us, myself and all of my colleagues from other prospective hospitals who so my girlfriend from Sutter, her chart populated with a drop down bar that offered them the ability to document that the patient was unvaccinated or the vaccination status was unknown. So the
Those were
Sutter
the only two
system,
choices?
those were the only two choices. So that's what the Sutter system offers. So the Sutter system patients, they would have their all of their patients either. So every vaccinated patient who came in with COVID was documented as unknown because we couldn't document that they were vaccinated.
Oh, okay.
And in addition to that, I'll tell you that from the get-go, as soon as these shots rolled out and I was working on the COVID floors, there was never a distinctive difference in the vaccination status of patients being admitted with COVID. And what I mean by that is that there was never a time when all of our COVID patients were unvaccinated after the
Mm.
rollout of these shots.
Mm.
So the shots were rolled out into my community in about March. I think it was the end of February of 2021. And within 3 or so weeks of the rollout of those shots, roughly 50% of the patients being admitted to Kaiser Permanente for COVID uh, were fully vaccinated.
Oh, so they would tell you, hey, I got all the vaccinations, and yet they still have COVID. And when you went to the intake system or somebody went to log them in, they would automatically stamp them as unvaccinated. So
That's
if
correct.
if somebody were running statistics, they using that false information, They could say, well, this is a pandemic of the unvaccinated, when in fact it was no such thing. People were getting COVID whether they were vaccinated or not. It didn't seem to make any difference.
That's correct. That's
Well,
exactly.
I can tell you as a guy that's been around, computers and computer people and programming, that is either a case of the most incredible sloth and laziness and carelessness that you can imagine, like somebody that should be fired, like, for an error that great, or that somebody said, make it this way. There's only two ways that could have happened. And I can tell you this, it could have been repaired, because it's like, computer programming is kind of like a mysterious black box to everybody, but it's like, renovating a house, you got a leaky window. All right, you put a new window in, you seal it up, no big deal. That amount of coding should not have taken, even a lame programmer should have been able to fix that in a half hour. A good one could have fixed it literally in 2 minutes. So the fact this thing persisted for so long and became the source of Joe Biden and other people saying, what do they say? It's a pandemic of the unvaccinated. That's where
Right.
they were getting their data from a computer system that wouldn't allow the medical personnel to take the record accurately.
Correct. That's
Amazing.
100% correct. And I would go under oath and testify to that
Well,
because
it's
that
just,
is the truth. And that's the thing. That's the thing that really gets to me is that I have all these people around me who say, oh, you're just spreading misinformation. You know what? I'll go under oath. We can pull up the documents. These are facts. And the longer we continue to ignore and deny them, the more harms that we continue to perpetrate, both on ourselves as practitioners for continuing to ignore the science and the ethical responsibilities that we have as practitioners to do what's right. So these are really, it's really people think that these types of oversights and and small little actions, they're not so impactful. They are so extraordinarily impactful. And that's the sad part of this is that I felt like at the time, I was just surrounded by people who were unwilling to do the right thing because they were afraid. Um,
mhm,
all of my colleagues were too afraid to speak the truth, and many of them, many of them, at that time when I was still working in the hospital before I was fired in October of 21, I would say probably roughly 15 to 20% of my colleagues knew that we were witnessing atrocities and crimes against humanity.
mhm.
And we would have conversations about it, and they were too afraid to speak out and do something about it. And they felt like they didn't have a choice. And then again, I think it comes back to the protocols. Their licenses were at risk, their mortgages were at risk, they were afraid for their children. But I'll stand up and tell all of them, I stood up from day one and I am in a 10 times better position than I was in uh, prior to COVID. And the reason for that comes back to my own personal freedom. Uh,
Mm.
I see my colleagues and I just feel sorry for them because I know that they have sold their souls because really that's what this is. It's like when you choose not to engage ethically and stand up for what's right, and you make these small little compromises of your integrity because you're afraid, you're selling your soul. And I am free. And that's what I love about this. That's what I love about being where I am and doing what I'm doing. I'm showing my children how to live freely and how to stand up for what's right. And that's irreplaceable. There's nothing that in the world that's more important to me than the lessons that I'm teaching my children by doing the right thing.
It's a great gift to them, because a lot of kids don't get to see that. They don't know what the right thing is because nobody's showing them. Now, you went through quite a bit. You were fired, of course. You had lived in California. What I know, I used to live in California, and what I know about what California's turned into, I don't think having to leave California is necessarily a bad thing, but you did have to leave your home. The Northern California is just heaven. I mean, on an Earth climate nature thing, it's hard to get better. But you had to leave your home. What kind of things did you endure besides the firing? Um, I know a lot of the nurses who did stand up have stories to tell about that.
Yeah, the hardest part for me was, and the reason that there are a few reasons why we left California. One of them was because I did have a severe autoimmune reaction to wearing
Well,
masks. And I became ostracized by my community over that.
and when
Uh,
you say your community, the community of nurses and medical people.
the whole community, the whole community.
Wow. So wow, let's unwrap this, make sure it's so. And I had once a really bad reaction to a variety of chemicals that I got exposed to accidentally from three different sources. It was crazy, and I developed a really bad autoimmune condition, which thank God it resolved. Um, but it's bad. You know, when you get that, it's really bad. And it can be triggered by, in your case, the stress, the trauma of what you were seeing, what you were trying to contend with. And now you have this piece of chemical construction around your face, which nobody would think is a healthy thing. And, there are people that are allergic to, is it latex? There's like they have to, so people have different allergies to different things. And if you're vulnerable to a particular manufactured thing, it can wear your system way down. I mean, it can break you down. And so this is what happened to you with the crazy mask wearing everybody was required to do. And so the reaction of your peers in the hospital and even your neighbors was, why aren't you
yes,
wearing a mask?
yes, my community, my whole community. It was really tragic. I'll have to send you the photo to post on this because um, my face was swollen. It was covered in boils,
Oh my God.
and there was nothing I could do. I saw specialists all over Northern California to try and, you know, treat and manage what had happened. But that's the thing with an autoimmune condition is that once it starts, it's permanent. And so, actually, if you can, let's see, right there might be a little speck of it on my cheek here, a little bit of
Mm-mm.
redness.
Gotcha.
I'm taking a supplement right now to stop because even though I don't wear masks anymore, it will still persist if I have any kind of chemicals or stress, it will come back. But I'm taking a supplement now to keep the reaction gone. But yeah, it was it's having it on your face, like that's what everyone sees when they look at you. It was
Yeah.
very
No,
it, and then, being met with rage and judgment and I was really suffering. I was really suffering because of what had happened. So that it really started because I was working doubles pretty much all the time when I would go to work. And so I was wearing a mask nonstop for usually, 9 to 17 hours a day. And at the hospitals, they wouldn't allow us to change our masks. I'm sure you remember this, but we were given one mask at the start of every shift, and that was the mask that we had to use our entire time at work. And so, that's not sanitary,
and pre-COVID, that would have been unthinkable.
unthinkable. Absolutely. So, yeah, it was, and then that, in addition to that, I was really very frightened for my children. I didn't want them to be, exposed to people with such extreme views. My son, he was in preschool at the time, and I was very concerned about, uh, just there was so much polarization in California over COVID and masking, and we were having like family attacking family, and it just it felt so unsafe for
Hmm.
me and my children that we made the decision to leave shortly after I was fired. I didn't really want to have anything to do with the state anymore because it just seemed so sad that we couldn't have, a difference of views and opinions and still remain friendly. It's,
And
you
the
just,
irony is you're the trained health professional with the science background, with the clinical background. You were on the front lines trying to help. They wouldn't give you proper gear. You developed this problem. I mean, just unbelievable. And instead of cutting you some slack, we encountered that. We live in a really tiny village, and most people respect each other here. But we did have one woman that threatened to out us for not being vaccinated. She was going to go to Facebook and warn the community. This was a friend of my wife's. It's kind of a heartbreaking kind of situation. So it sounds like you had it times 10, and then, we don't have little kids at home. So that's a whole nother dimension. You don't want them exposed to such a thing.
I
So now
know.
you're free, you're on the road. What are you doing these days?
So my husband and I, it's wonderful that we have each other. He's so supportive. He 100% understands and respects my experience and expertise. Uh, he was actually a trained civil engineer, and
Oh.
he had spent over 10 years in his field. I had told you off air, I'm not sure if I said on here, we had two real estate investment properties that we were renting. So that was another part of this, is like, well, I wasn't necessarily reliant on my paycheck because we had diversified our
Mm-hmm.
assets before
Mm-hmm.
COVID. And so I was like, "Oh, you're going to fire me for saying the truth and doing what's right? Go ahead."
Yeah. Okay.
And and for me, it really came down to taking legal action. So after leaving the healthcare field, I honestly don't ever plan to return uh, to the current system. I would like to build a new private parallel system.
Mm-hmm.
Where we focus on wellness and curative medicine rather
Mm-hmm.
than treatment of symptoms
Mm-hmm.
with medication that just masks the problem without
Mm-hmm.
down to
Mm-hmm.
root causes. So, really, that's, I think, the good thing that's come out of all of this is that, we really need to start and stop and reassess, like, what are we doing in medicine? Because it's not just COVID. The
Right.
entire the entire charade is full of low quality care that doesn't respect um the divine potential of the human body. I feel this all the time that we our bodies are designed to cohabitate with the world around us.
Right.
Being afraid of viruses and bacteria, that's all nonsense. If we have a balanced ecosystem within our bodies and we have achieved physical and mental wellness, those kinds of infections, I mean, despite the fact that they're relatively easily treatable, they really don't need to be a threat to us if we are living in wellness.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's a lot of this to me, is like, well, we need to rethink the whole strategy around health and wellness, because all of this fear, it's not natural. I mean,
Right.
when you think about it, fear is, it's low vibrational. It's not, I mean, our bodies are designed to live in wellness, and why aren't we doing that? So that's a part of where I'm going. The path there is through legal accountability. So my husband left his career and is now in law school. He's a paralegal now as well. We are both approaching legal remedy to COVID crimes against humanity. In addition to that, I work with a nonprofit organization called Stand Firm Now, and it's a platform of practitioners. So Dr. Christiane Northrup, I don't know if you know her.
Oh,
She is
sure.
she is the lead on that. It's her, myself, and one other woman. We've created this
Wow.
nonprofit to gather expert witness testimony. So we're seeking out practitioners who are willing to sign an affidavit to build up a stockpile of evidence so that when attorneys go to litigate COVID crimes against humanity, they have thousands of expert witnesses in one group ready to come and testify. So what that'll do, so what attorneys keep saying is that they can't succeed in court because precedence has not been set.
Right.
So, and a stockpile of expert witness testimony will establish the fact pattern that COVID crimes against humanity have occurred. And it'll completely shift the paradigm and dynamics of the legal platform that we're currently working off of. So those are kind of my goals. That's what I'm working on, and that's what I believe to be the way forward if we're going to, you know, come out of this, as human beings. Like, let's find the best way out. These seem to be the best avenues to me.
What's the URL again, please?
So it's www.standfirmnow.org.
What a
standfirmnow.org.
.org. What a great domain name. Easy to remember. Standfirmnow.org.
Yeah.
So
And it can be any practitioner, retired or active. It doesn't really matter your expertise. We've created a legal affidavit that's very it's called the 20, I think it's 24 COVID commonalities, but it's a very streamlined document. You can do anything you want with it. That's the thing I always tell practitioners. If there's something in there that you don't agree with, scratch it out, because an
mhm.
affidavit is a statement of truth. So it really has to be your truth. We try to compile a document that every practitioner could attest to make it easy for people, because it's very hard for people to take the time out of their
Sure.
life
And to
to go
think, and sometimes even
something.
to remember, it already seems like the distant past, and it's easy to forget important things. So you've got
Yeah.
sort of a checklist of things for them to think about, and they might be reminded, oh yeah, that went on too. For instance, I don't know if this is the document, there's something called commonalities. Is that the one you mean? Or is that
So
a
our
different?
document is called COVID commonalities. There might be something else out there that's similar, but you
Okay.
might be thinking of ours.
Yeah, good. Because one of them, one of the commonalities is something that I've heard over and over again, that very often families would be called at 4 o'clock in the morning. Like, what are the odds that somebody's dying at 4 o'clock in the morning? I mean, there's 24 hours in a day. And, if cops want to kick in a door because they're going after some really bad guys, they do it at 4 in the morning because that's when people are the most out of it. And to see that every time a family had to make a quick, or was forced, they didn't have to, they were tricked into making a quick, irrevocable medical decision on behalf of their loved one. For some reason, the call often always came at 4 in the morning. I don't know if that's one of your lists, middle of the night calls. There's never an emergency at noon. It's always at 4 in the morning. So there's all these weird things that went on. And it's great that you put that list together. And can people get it at standfirmnow.org?
Yes, they can. There's a whole step-by-step process. It's very simple. We made it as easy as possible. You do have to go to either your bank or a UPS store and get the document notarized when you're finished with it. But you can change it and add to it, um, and then upload it back up onto our website, and then send the hard copy to our legal counsel who's protecting the data. And then once we have enough of it, once we have enough practitioners who have come forward, we have a legal counsel who will get this evidence submitted into the courts. He's done this thousands of times. And we have very interesting, cool, exciting processes to get evidence through the courts, regardless of what the judges, because that's another reality that we're facing right now, is that the courts are just as corrupt as the medical facilities. They throw out cases without due process. The judges are practicing from the bench, which is a violation of every code and ethics of, in these legal platforms. So that's another reason why, my husband and I are really trying to get after the legal side of this, because we really have to be able to stop them. And the only way to do that is by bringing the law down on them, and or motivating the public to realize that we need to take action.
So even if somebody's not a practitioner, they could still go to standfirmnow.org and learn about what you're doing and read those 24 points. And because I have a feeling there are, I mean, I have a neighbor, he knows for sure his father-in-law was killed by these protocols. They've chosen not to do anything about it. Well, I'll tell you this: they did have a meeting with the hospital's attorney while the father-in-law was being killed, and so at a certain point, my friend turned to the attorneys of the hospital. It was the attorneys and the doctors were all in a conference room with this man, and he turned to them and said, "So to the doctors, he said, so the lawyers are making the decision on how this guy's going to be treated?" And they said, "Yeah." So that's a whole nother dimension of lawyers actually somehow running medicine at these hospitals. But there are families that will fight back, that want will do something, but some of them may not even be aware exactly what happened, or would also use the term gaslit, which is very common in the medical profession. If they ask questions, they're shooed away, and they're told there's nothing here, there's nothing to look at. Oh, you're crazy. Oh, you don't know what you're talking about. Having a site like yours, people can go and see, my goodness, there's hundreds, there's thousands of practitioners that have testified to this. I can't be crazy. This must have really happened. And then they have a potential to file their own legal actions.
Yeah,
And
and that's what this is for. This is to support anyone, whether a victim or a practitioner. I mean, ultimately, the practitioners are victims of all this true too, just in a different way. Um, but that's what this evidence is for. It's to give voice to the victims, specifically the family members, the vaccine injured, and the practitioners who tried to stop what had happened, and received reprimands for doing so.